of letting people know about this. So maybe you'll see some of the things that I was talking about. Can we say this is like a 10-minute interview? Is that okay?
Fine with me.
I know I'm a little bit over time here, but is that enough time for you?
That sounds wonderful.
Well, thank you very much. We're talking with, see, there again, I did it wrong. We're not talking with Aleq Boyle. I'm talking with Aleq Boyle, and you're with the John C. Fremont Foundation, and we want to learn a little bit more about, I want to learn a little bit more about John C. Fremont. It's very difficult, you see. First of all, tell me, and if I had done a little bit more work on this, I would have had an introduction. I might have said a few things in the introduction about John C. Fremont, but I didn't have time.
Maybe I can do it.
Yeah, go ahead.
First, one thing that you might want to consider, the name of, or the web domain is johncfremont.org. The formal name of the organization is actually Fremont Civics Foundation, and it's common for a lot of people to refer to us as John C. Fremont Foundation because of the domain. Maybe that's something I need to revisit. John C. Fremont is one of the most prolific figures of the nearly 50 years of the last 1800s from the 19th century. He is probably most noted for being the man who mapped the Oregon Trail. One of the things that he's also considered as the first point person to help the United States fulfill the concept of manifest destiny. He is also known as the West's greatest explorer.
He's also the first Republican presidential nominee, correct?
Yes, that's true, but our foundation focuses on civics, and I try and sometimes lay off the partisan part, and even though the Republican Party of 1856 is just a little bit different today.
Well, how did you become interested in John C. Fremont?
That, ironically, goes back to my interest in politics, my personal interest in civics. As a young boy in the hills of Appalachia, Georgia, and the Blue Ridge Mountain areas, it's very common for a lot of us to want to go camping, and that led me to an organization called the Boy Scouts, which basically is a great example of teaching the concepts of civics in a variety of ways. And then we progressed forward, and my love for politics, I decided to do some research about the Republican Party, and that's when I discovered Fremont. And learning more and more about him and how he was such a man of incredible character and following his own noble purpose in spite of the times. You've got to understand where slavery was in the 1850s and 40s, and for this man to chart a course to conquer something that I find it unfathomable to think of people owning people.
Well, he conquered a lot as far as exploration is concerned. We'll get into his bio just a little bit. He was born in 1813 here in Savannah. Did he spend much time here?
Actually, he grew up here as a boy, and then he went away to the College of Charleston. And he did his very first career choice was in the coastal area as well, because he served for the U.S. Navy as a professor on board ship.
He became very interested in civil engineering, and I guess did that lead him into an interest in mapping and exploring?
Actually, what happened was he decided that, I guess, he wanted to focus more on being an explorer, but he had something that I think is very important for all of us to have in our lives. There was a French scientist who came into his life that became sort of a mentor and taught him a lot of the stuff about the mapping and engineering and science in general. And then he found himself with kind of gravitating to the Army, what would be today the Army Corps of Engineers. And in that process, he became very interested and decided he'd seen the ocean, and he decided he wanted to see what lay on the other side of the great United States. Only that time it was referred to as the United States.
He wanted to see the other ocean.
I believe so, yes.
How did he get there?
Well, in the 1830s, him and a gentleman by the name of Kit Carson, who people seem to know the name Kit Carson. The don't know the name John C. Fremont. And I find that interesting and ironic. But a lot of people realize that St. Louis is called the gateway to the West. And Fremont was given orders to basically map a way west. And part of his mission by the President of the United States and the Army was, we want you to send back to the papers, we want you to explore in the way you write. He was also a prolific writer. He's written many books. And we want you to talk about what America is and explain it in great detail. So he had to be a great observer, and in that process, he became the mouthpiece for Horace Greeley's great statement, "Go West, young man."
Manifest Destiny, which you brought up before, this idea that the United States should expand all the way to the western coast, that couldn't have been possible unless you know it's there.
That's exactly right, and it was Fremont's job to basically tell us what was there, and to some degree, from my research, to paint a rosy picture of how to get there.
So he mapped much of the West between the Mississippi and the Pacific. Then what happened to him during the Civil War?
Well, time warped a little bit. He basically saved California. He was California's version of Davy Crockett, and literally saved thousands of settlers from virtual murder by the Mexicans. And in that, he was made California's very first U.S. senator, is kind of their reward in thanking him later on.
There was this little war in California.
Well, the Bear Flag Revolt?
We sort of forget about the small wars, but that's where he became a major.
That's exactly right. He was promoted and then actually made territorial governor, and then had a personal situation where he was tried and convicted of mutiny.
So he was court-martialed.
He was court-martialed.
But he came back. This is getting to the Civil War. He came back.
It's hard for me to leave because there's a lot of interesting things in there, but I will go into the Civil War mode. Obviously, when the war started, Fremont, having been born in Georgia, was not allowed to be a part of the Lincoln Inner Circle. Many people on Lincoln's Inner Circle didn't want Fremont around because he was a Georgian, and he had also had his own political base because he had ran for president in 1856, and then he also mentored Lincoln in that because Lincoln ran as vice president in 1856. So when Lincoln comes back and is elected president, Fremont is overlooked for several high-ranking cabinet posts. Well, when the war breaks out, they decide, well, let's go ahead, and Fremont was appointed military major general, which is two-star general. And his first assignment was military governor of Missouri, and also overseeing the western military operations.
Why, he's known for his anti-slavery views, and having fierce anti-slavery views. How did he get those? Why did he have these fierce anti-slavery views?
I think that from his boyhood days here in Savannah, that he had a lot of friends of a variety of backgrounds, and I suspect he had even black friends. They were other children that he played with. And I suspect he just grew up thinking that this just isn't right. And then if you look at when he went west, he had the allegiance of several varieties of Indian tribes. And he was literally a friend to the Native Americans as well. So he just seems to have this natural understanding of that all humanity is to be treated fairly and the same, and that people shouldn't own slaves. And I think that was just engrounded in him as a concept that is just the way things should be.
And so how did he pave the way for Lincoln?
He carries with him these beliefs into his military career, and very early on, he becomes the defining individual and the first emancipator. And he issues an order as military governor of Missouri that frees all slaves in the state of Missouri as power of a military governor, thus becomes the first United States government official to free slaves. And that defining moment.
Abraham didn't like that.
Not at all, because one of the things that people don't realize is Abraham Lincoln was a very shrewd politician, and there were a lot of border states that had a lot of slaves that didn't want to lose their slaves, and there were backroom deals in the process of being negotiated. So when we free all the slaves in the Deep South, some of you good folks in Kentucky and Indiana and Missouri, we're going to let you keep your slaves. Well, John C. Fremont wouldn't have that. He said in his mindset, you just cannot do that. So he had to literally push the envelope with the powers that he had. And when he did this, Lincoln basically issued a communication saying, please rescind your order, because it was a lawful order. This is important for people to understand. He did have the authority to do this. Fremont was not known for being the greatest tactician there is, but he did have the authority to do it. Well, Lincoln said, I'm probably not, we want it to be different. Please rescind it. And Fremont took ended his military career and perhaps his political career for the day to a degree, and said, sir, I've done the right and noble thing. If you want it rescinded, you do it.
Just a few wrap-up questions, if we could. What do you find the most surprising thing about John Fremont that most people don't know?
I like the fact that his very first career is that in education, and that he chooses to be a professor of mathematics in a very unique venue by doing it on a ship.
And what do you hope to accomplish with the foundation?
The Fremont Civics Foundation simply wants to shine a light on the concepts of civics, and ironically, Fremont's birthday is Friday, January the 21st. If he were alive, he'd be 197. And we want to talk about civics. Our mission statement is to advance civics, leadership, and international understanding. And a great example of the concept of civics is a civil society, and you can't hardly have that unless you have free people, unless we make sure more people are able to live their lives and engage their government in a productive, sane manner.
Anything I left out that you want to add?
Not at all. Thank you for asking, and I want to thank you, Vaca, for inviting me to be a part of this great opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, now that you've been